Hey there, today we have another part of the series for Ask a Pilot a Question. Our Travel Tips by Laurie community on Instagram has asked the questions for this pilot video. The number one question is, what is a contrail?
A contrail is basically when the hot exhaust coming out of the engine meets cold air, and so the water vapor in the air condenses out, so it looks like a cloud.
Like, why don't you see it after every single airplane?
It depends on the temperature of the air, how much humidity is in the air. So for civilian, it's not really a big deal. In military applications, it is a big deal for like spy planes. You don't want to be seen. So spy planes care very much about contrails, and they can climb or descend to get into better air where you won't see them.
Another question is, why are some wings bent up and some are not at all?
When a plane flies through the air splits. Some goes over the top of the wing, some goes over the bottom of the wing. And then as you get towards the end of the wing is when sometimes those air streams collide. So we put what they call a wing fence or a winglet or a sharklet to help smooth out the airflow coming over the edge of the wing.
So therefore, there should not be any turbulence, right? All right, so we know turbulence is normal, but when do we need to worry is another question.
Most airplanes are so over-engineered for this. There's different levels of turbulence. So I would say make sure your seatbelt is on, and if they ask the flight attendants to sit down, that means they've heard something or see something ahead of them that is not comfortable for our passengers. So just heed the seatbelt sign and pay attention to it. Always keep your seatbelt on when you're seated.
It'll also be in the first pinned comment that I have. One of the questions was, what do you wish you could tell ground handlers?
I would tell them that I appreciate what they do and the weather and the elements they have to work in.
We do have an entire video that he dedicated to teaching us about turbulence. I will make sure I have that below for you to watch. Another question for Chris, his name is Chris, is why in the world, when you are running late or when there is no gate available, why can't you just pull over and walk down the air stairs and enter another door like on the lower level of the airport, like we used to sometimes?
So airports are very complex pieces of property, and an airline, especially one that flies multiple different types of airplanes, you can't just jump to another gate sometimes because that gate may not be able to handle the plane of your size, or it would then make the gates on either side of you unusable based on wingspan. So there's a lot of moving parts that go into it. And the reason we don't use air stairs anymore is, number one, is safety. It is a safety hazard going downstairs versus using a jet bridge. And the other reason is security. When you have people on the ramp, now you have to have additional security agents to escort those people into the building to make sure that nobody just walks away and goes into parts of the airport that they're not supposed to be in. So it just takes a lot of logistical extra work to use air stairs and walk on the ground versus just finding us another gate or sometimes having to wait till your gate's available.
This question is twofold. One is, what tips do you have for anxious flyers? And we have a whole entire video about that as well, but I'm going to ask him his tip on that. And then also, in light of the recent tragedies, help us feel safe about airplane travel.
If you're an anxious flyer, I highly recommend you choose to fly very early in the morning before lunchtime. Especially in the summertime, that just tends to be when the earth heats up and creates uneven currents, which can create some bumps and turbulence. Airplanes that are in turbulence you'll feel less of the effects of it. Normally, if you sit forward of the wings, I realize with a lot of airlines, it costs extra to sit up there now, but closer to the front of the airplane, you'll feel less of the yaw that an airplane has. And then go ask your pilots. Ask if you can talk to the pilots and tell them that you're an anxious flyer. A lot of pilots will tell you the forecast weather, what the rides are going to be like. So don't be shy to go left or ask the flight attendant, may I go speak with the pilots because I'm an anxious flyer. Yaw is just the back of the tail going side to side. And then in light of recent tragedies, yes, airplanes occasionally do crash. That is a fact of life. It is still, however, the safest way to travel, statistically speaking, of any other conveyance of travel. We are highly trained, and in every tragedy, they learn something that prevents the next one. So it will not just be ignored and move on. We're going to learn something from it, and we'll most likely implement a change if that was an issue for the next time we fly, but it is still by far the safest way to travel. And the other thing I will say, we live in the world of social media and news, so every single little we had to return to the gate for mechanical is going to get all kinds of attention. When returning to the gate for an issue is a good thing, that means that your pilots saw something that they did not want to take the airplane airborne with. And so that should be treated as something good, not something bad.
We're on vacation this week when we're filming, so we are sharing the microphone. Another question we had is, why don't pilots tell us about the cool things that we are flying over? And also, why can we not understand hardly any pilot ever when they are talking on their microphone?
So probably 20 years ago, we went from having nothing on the airplane to showing movies and videos and entertainment. And so every time that a pilot would get on and point out some point of interest, you're stopping the movie. So we got a lot of complaints about stop talking to us because we're trying to watch movies. So I think most pilots realize then, well, let's not point out stuff because it is interrupting movies in the back. Now that has evolved to streaming entertainment, and most people are wearing headphones anyway. So they probably don't care or want to hear any points of interest along the way. Airplane manufacturers do not spend a ton of money on passenger address systems. They're not the best stereo quality you're going to find. Also, you're trying to talk through just the noise of the airstream plus the engines at altitude, which make it harder to hear. And yes, pilots are not disc jockeys, so some really don't like talking in publicly. And so they may just try to make it as short, as sweet as possible. So you have a lot of things going against you in trying to make a clear announcement that you can hear.
If you could sit anywhere in the airplane, where would you sit?
I prefer to sit on a window seat because I like to look out the window, and probably just a little forward of the wing because you get a better view of what's going on. Sitting over the wing is great, but you can't see the ground beneath you. That's my favorite place to sit.
One question is from a mom. Her 6-year-old wants to be a pilot. Do you know any books that would help with that? And then also, how did you get started as a pilot? Military, or what avenue did you take? Or what runway did you take?
I don't have a particular book that I know of. When you get on an airplane, though, a lot of airlines have little coloring kits or kits for kids that talk about the different parts of an airplane. And ask the flight attendant if they go up and talk to the pilots. We'll gladly bring a kid up there and show them all parts of the airplane, trading cards, wings. There's lots of stuff we can give out, but if they want to ask questions, we'll happily do that. I was one of those kids. I knew I wanted to fly an airplane since I was very little. And it was put in concrete when my uncle took me flying in his airplane. And from then I knew that's what I wanted to do. At the time, joining the military was a risk. You may not get a pilot slot. And then if you did, they wanted like a 10-year commitment, which seemed a little long for me. So I chose to go the civilian route. And about 17 years old or 18 years old, I started taking flying lessons at a local airport, which then eventually led to becoming a flight instructor and teaching other people to fly, which then eventually led to getting enough hours to get hired with an airline. I love watching airplanes. So I had a little air traffic control radio. And when I was like 12 or 13, times were much different then. My mom would drop me off at the airport and I would stand on the parking garage and watch airplanes take off and land for about 6 hours. And then she'd come back and pick me up and drive me home. That was usually like spring break or summer vacation.
Another question is, what is the safest place to sit inside the airplane? Some people think it's the back. Is that true?
Not always. It depends on the issue, but yes, they do keep the black box, or the really orange, and the cockpit voice recorder in the back of the airplane, because that has been shown to be the least part of the damage of an airplane when it does have an issue.
Another question is, what about someone who wants to start a pilot career at the age of 38? Is it doable?
So the aviation industry is going through a big turnover. We are forced to retire at 65, and we have quite a large wave of pilots returning 65 in the next 10 years. So I would say you can start a career at 38. Realize probably the first 5 years is going to be just getting the necessary ratings and the experience to be eligible to fly at an airline. Right now in the United States, you have to have 1,500 hours of total flying time before you can even apply to an airline. And that does take a long time to get once you start learning to fly. It is doable, however. Seniority is what drives us in airlines in terms of what airplane you fly, how big or small of an airplane you fly, and whether you sit as a first officer and a captain. And so, since you have to retire at 65, you may not be able to enjoy the full benefits of being senior at an airline because you are starting so late and you roughly only have from 38 years. Let's say it takes you 5 years to get hired. That's 43 years to 65. You either may never make it to captain or maybe never make it to a wide body captain if that's your goal or desire.
When there is a flight delay, why does it seem to be a secret on the real reason for the delay?
That is a very good question. And sometimes we are not a party as pilots to the reason for the delay. But it's a dynamic environment. And for example, if your flight is late because of an inbound airplane that's late, what the airline's trying not to do is say, well, we're going to delay it 3 hours, and then they find another airplane they can use. Well, now they've already delayed the flight 3 hours. So it's hard to claw back a delay once you've posted a delayed flight. So they are trying to manage the situation and use all their resources to come up with an alternative to having to delay a flight longer than necessary.
Why do airline employees who fly standby seem to always get the good seats?
I think I can speak on behalf. We don't always get good seats. We've been in the very back of an airplane before. Normally, the reason I would say was that customers chose not to upgrade to premium seats, or so those seats are empty, and that's what employees fly on, is empty seats. So most likely, it's just filling seats with employees that customers chose not to pay for.
The next question is, what is your favorite route to fly? And do you get to choose those routes?
My favorite route to fly, I mean, there's no particular one. I think better, what cities do I prefer to lay over in is probably better, because an airplane just goes from point A to point B. I love flying in the Pacific Northwest. Seattle, Vancouver, Portland are beautiful to fly into, especially in the summer. How do we pick where we fly? It depends on the airplane you're on and where it flies. And then everything we do is based on seniority. So most airlines, they have software that will build trips 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 days. And then if you are into, let's say, laying over in Vancouver, you can bid to fly those trips. But how it's awarded is all based on your seniority.
The next question is, what is your biggest pet peeve of passengers?
I wouldn't say it is a pet peeve. I do realize that some people like to be in control, and sometimes when you get in an airplane and you're sitting in the back, you're no longer in control. Just understand, we all have the same desire. We want to get from point A to point B safely. And so sometimes that may mean we go back to the gate to look at something. We delay our takeoff for weather. It is not just to inconvenience you. It is to be safe, because we all have families to come home to as well. So it is really us just trying to do the best we can with the weather and the tools we have to get you to your destination safely.
These two questions are kind of the same. How long have you been flying, and when will you retire?
I have been a pilot since I was about 18, started flying 18, 19. And when are you retiring? Well, we're required to retire at the age of 65. You can retire early if you choose to, or we have pilots that have medical conditions that no longer allow them to fly. So it just changed, but I would like to go to 65, so I have about 10 years left.
I almost forgot about this question. How do pilots navigate across the Atlantic? Like, once you leave Newfoundland, isn't radar service terminated?
Navigating across the Atlantic has come so far with the advent of satellites. So we do leave radar service once we leave Newfoundland, but we then link into a pilot controller data link system, which is all bouncing satellites, signals off satellites. And our airplane is also communicating with someone on the ground via satellite, where it's constantly telling it our position, airspeed, latitude, longitude. So we can do all kinds of normal air traffic control, even though there's no physical radar signal, because it's all being provided by the airplane via satellites.
The final question is, what is your favorite time of day to fly?
My favorite time of day to fly is early in the morning. I'm a morning person by nature anyway, and that's when usually the air is the smoothest and the quietest, especially during the summertime. So I would like to fly, I don't know, anywhere from 6 a.m. by 2 p.m. I'd like to be done flying, especially in the summertime in the United States, where the weather can get worse with thunderstorms popping up during the day.
That's all of our questions in today's video. The other videos will be in the first pinned comment or the description under this video. Say hey if we have not met you yet.